Welcome to Gospel Truth with Andrew Womack, a teaching ministry that focuses on God's unconditional love and grace. And now, here's Andrew.
Welcome to our Thursday's broadcast of the Gospel Truth. Today I'm continuing my teaching about Elijah, and I tell you, I really enjoy this. The Lord has used the story of Elijah, the life of Elijah as recorded in 1 Kings, to just really challenge me, and I tell you, it's made a difference in my life. And I believe that this teaching will make a difference in your life if you will take it and personalize it. This isn't just about a person who lived 3,000-4,000 years ago. This is about a man who was in union with God, had a word from God, and because of it, he saw an entire nation transformed. If you've missed any of this, please get our materials. I've got this new book and a new study guide entitled Lessons from Elijah, and we also have it on CD and DVD. I've already talked about 1 Kings 17 and most of 1 Kings chapter 18, where Elijah called for a duel between the prophets of Baal and himself, the prophet of God, and they put a sacrifice out, but they didn't put any fire to it. They had all the wood there, but they didn't light a fire, and they called on God, and the God who answered by fire, he would be the true God. And so we've already been through all that. Elijah won. Our God sent fire from heaven and just consumed the sacrifice, burned up the sacrifice, burned up the wood, burned up the water, burnt up the rocks. The rocks were consumed. It was such an intense fire. And when the people saw it, they fell on their face and they cried out, "The Lord, He is the God. The Lord, He is the God." Man, that's awesome. I tell you, I love this. And I made a lot of comparisons about this. Again, please get this teaching. I hadn't got time to go back over that. In 1 Kings chapter 18, verse 39, that's where they said, "The Lord, He is the God." And then in verse 40 it says, "And Elijah said unto them, Take the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape. And they took them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon, and slew them there." Now often you'll hear people talk about that was 450 prophets, but again, look over in 1 Kings chapter 18 and in verse 19, Elijah said, "Now therefore send and gather to me all Israel unto Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal 450, and the prophets of the groves 400, which sit at Jezebel's table." So altogether there was 850 of these prophets, and Elijah took them down to the brook that was at the bottom of Mount Carmel. You know, I've been on Mount Carmel. And I stood there. I mean, it really impacted me to be at that exact spot, to look out over the Mediterranean. And it just so happened that day that it was a completely clear day. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. And I had to strain and look. And then I saw a little tiny cloud about the size of a man's hand, exactly as recorded right here, the exact same spot. I went and looked down at the brook Kishon. This really just made it come alive, but Elijah took these 850 men and he killed them there. Now, praise God, we live in a different day than Elijah. You know, some people don't understand this, and they think that the Bible is just barbaric, and I've had people that have ridiculed the Bible and say, "So are you just supposed to kill anybody who disagrees with Christianity today?" No, because we live under a new covenant. In the old covenant, people couldn't be born again. And once they had given themselves over to demonic stuff, it was like a cancer. The only way to cure it was to cut it out, to amputate that arm or something. That's a terrible, severe judgment, but we still do it today when trying to deal with cancer because we don't have a cure for cancer. But if there was a cure for cancer, you wouldn't have people start getting irradiated. You wouldn't have them start cutting off parts of their body. If there was a cure, that changes everything. We now have a cure for all of these things that were prevalent in the Old Testament, and so you don't go kill everybody who disagrees. They can be born again and changed. In the Old Testament, if you had a child that cursed your father or mother, you were supposed to kill them. And the reason, because ring is as a sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. 1 Samuel chapter 15 says that. When a person is in rebellion, it's demonic. In the Old Testament, you couldn't be born again. You couldn't be delivered of demons. So once a person gave themselves over to this, you had to kill them. Some people think, see, the Bible is just barbaric, but it was again because the cure hadn't come. Now we have a cure through Jesus. You can be cleansed of anything from which you could not be cleansed under the Old Testament. Acts chapter 13 says that. And so we don't treat people the same way today. But the same principles apply. And that is that Elijah showed zero tolerance for people who didn't believe in God. Now, in our day, we extend mercy to them and we woo them by love and stuff, but it still should be the same thing. We shouldn't sit there and just say, well, there's many paths unto God. No, there's only one right way, and we shouldn't have any tolerance because there is no salvation in Buddha or Mohammed or in anybody else. It says in Acts chapter 4, it says, neither is there any other name under heaven given among men whereby you must be saved. Jesus is the only Savior. There is no other path to God, and we need to show a zero tolerance. Don't go out and kill the people the way that Elijah did, but we ought to have the same attitude that, you know what, we just triumph over and there is no compromise, and you stand for what the truth is, and there is no other way unto God. Man, that's pretty strong. He killed 850 people, and it doesn't say that he caused the other people to go out and do it. He did it himself. Now, that's going to become very important down here in chapter 19. I just want to leave you with that. So in verse 41, it says, and Elijah said unto Ahab, get thee up, eat and drink, for there is the sound of abundance of rain. Now, this wasn't in the natural realm. There wasn't any sound of rain in the natural. This was in his heart. He said up here in verse 36 that he had done all of these things at the word of the Lord. And God had already told him that after this showdown with the prophets of Baal and after the fire of God fell, after the people turned to the Lord, that the Lord was going to end this drought and send rain. So he had another word from God. And he went up to the top of Mount Carmel. Remember, he had gone down to the bottom of this mountain. It really isn't that what I'd call a mountain in Colorado, but it was hundreds of feet taller. And he went back up to the top of Mount Carmel and told Ahab to get in his chariot and head for home because it was going to rain. He needed to get there before the rain struck. And in verse 42 it says, so Ahab went up to eat and to drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Carmel, and he cast himself down upon the earth and put his face between his knees and said to his servant, go up now, look toward the sea. And he went up and looked and said, there is nothing. And he said, go again 7 times. You know, again, I could spend a day or two preaching on this one thing right here. I'm just going to say these things quickly. I've got another teaching entitled A Better Way to Pray. I've got a lot of teaching on prayer. But the Lord had already spoken to Elijah that he was going to send rain. And that's the reason he said, I hear the sound of abundance of rain. And he told Ahab to get in his chariot and head for home. And yet, there wasn't a cloud in the sky. God had already given him his word. But does that mean that it just automatically comes to pass? No, Elijah had a part to play in it, and he started praying and releasing what God had already spoken to him was going to come to pass. Like I said, I could spend a lot of time trying to balance this because most people can't connect these two things. Most people think it's either God, it's just if it's God's will for a person to be healed, if it's God's will for a person to be prosperous, for them to be delivered of their depression or whatever they're fighting, if it's God's will, then it'll just happen. Nope, that's not so, because God flows through people. God had already told Elijah what was going to happen, and so he spoke it, and it was going to happen, but it had to flow through him. He had to release this power through his faith. And the first time he prayed, he sent his servant to go look towards the sea, and he couldn't see a thing. He said there was nothing. It was contrary to his prayer. Now notice that Elijah didn't just get up and go look. You know, the person who's doing the praying, the person who's doing the believing, you don't need to just be focused on the natural and waiting to see something. You need to be in the supernatural, in the spiritual realm. You need to be walking by faith and not by sight. You know, I just prayed for a woman recently, and she asked prayer for her knee, and I forgot now exactly what it was, but there was something really bad wrong with her knee, and I asked her, I said, can I put my hand on your knee? She was wearing slacks. And she said, yes. And she started to tell me, she says, you'll be able to feel and see. And I said, don't tell me all this stuff. I said, if you want me to pray for you and believe, don't get me into unbelief giving me all of the details. I said, I'm going to lay hands on your knee and it'll be healed. And I did, and she was able to walk, and all of her pain had left her. That just happened last week. But I'm saying the person who's doing the praying, sometimes people want to give you the whole negative report and show you everything that's wrong and let you see the spot and how bad it is. Elijah wasn't like that. Elijah, he was staying before God, and he sent somebody else to go see if there was any physical manifestation. See, there's a balance between these two. You don't need to just believe and ignore the physical, but you can get to where you are so focused on the physical that if you don't see something, it affects your believing. That's not the way it needs to be. There's a balance between this. You need to stand and believe God, but at the same time, there needs to be a physical manifestation of what you're praying for. So he sent his servant 7 different times. You know, look at a passage of Scripture over here in James chapter 5. This is talking about Elijah, and it quotes him in the New Testament. So in James chapter 5, in verse 17, Elias, that's talking about Elijah, was a man subject to like passions as we are, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain, and it rained not on the earth by the space of 3 years and 6 months. This is the only place in Scripture that we get the exact length of that drought that came as a result of Elijah's prophecy. And in verse 18 it says, and he prayed again, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth brought forth its fruit. Notice the terminology here. It didn't say he prayed again and again and again and again 7 times. It says he prayed and it didn't rain, and he prayed again and the heaven gave rain. So actually this is only one prayer, but there were 7 times he sent his servant to see if there was any manifestation of what he was praying for. And again, I could spend more time on this, but this is an attitude you need to get in prayer. You need to believe. According to Mark chapter 11, verse 24, it says, whatsoever things you desire, when you pray, believe that you receive them, and you shall have them. Notice it says you have to believe you receive when you pray, and then you shall, future tense, have them. It might only be a second or 10 seconds or a day, but it is a future tense manifestation. You have to believe you receive before there is the physical manifestation. So Elijah prayed, and according to James 5:18, I believe he only prayed once, but he sent his servant 7 different times. In other words, here's the way that I pray. I pray and believe that I receive when I pray. But if I don't see the physical manifestation, I continue to pray. I just don't ask for it over again, because I believe that I received when I pray. But I continue to pray. I'll pray a prayer of thanksgiving, because thanksgiving and praise builds me up and focuses my attention on the answer instead of the problem. I'll also pray a prayer of agreement. I might get somebody else to say, now I already have prayed and I know I've got it. I know God has done what I asked for, but I want you to agree according to Matthew 18. If any 2 agree as touching anything on this earth, they shall have whatsoever they ask of their Father. So I can continue to pray and pray a prayer of agreement. I can also pray a prayer taking my authority and speaking to the devil and saying, I command this sickness or this financial problem or whatever to get out of my way. I can continue to pray, but it's actually only one prayer. I believe that I received when I pray, but I continue to pray until I see the manifestation. Over in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, it says, pray without ceasing. And there's different ways that you can take that. Most people think that this means that you're supposed to pray all of the time. Well, I'm not praying right now. I'm making television programs. When I'm asleep, I'm not praying. When I'm preaching, I'm not praying. I don't think that that's talking about that you pray 24 hours a day. I guess you could say it means that you're in an attitude of prayer, you're constantly in communion with the Lord. But another way of taking that is to say that you start praying for something, like for instance, if God promised you that by His stripes you are healed, and then the doctor tells you you're sick, you pray and you believe for healing, and you stand on that prayer and you keep praying until you see physical manifestation. But you don't pray over and over. You don't ask God today to heal you, and then tomorrow, oh God, please heal me again. If you pray that, it's because you didn't believe He heard your first prayer. You have to believe that you were healed, but it takes a period of time for what is in the spiritual realm to manifest itself in the physical realm. You know, if a doctor was to give you, if they had a miracle pill for cancer, and if they gave you this pill and you swallowed this pill, you know, it might take 24 hours or 48 hours or 72 hours or something, but you would believe that I'm healed and that healing is working, but it might take a period of time before you see the full manifestation of it. That's the way it is when you pray for something. You pray and you believe that you're healed. The healing power of God is in you, but your body hasn't reflected it yet, and so you continue to pray, not asking again to be healed because you believed you received the first time you prayed, but you continue to pray, thanking God, bringing your senses under control, walking by faith instead of walking by sight. This is what Elijah did. He prayed, and he sent his servants 7 times. And finally, on the 7th time, it says in verse 44, it came to pass at the 7th time that he said, Behold, there ariseth a little cloud out of the sea like a man's hand. And he said, Go up, say unto Ahab, Prepare thy chariot, get thee down, that the rain stop thee not. In other words, he didn't have to see the full-blown storm. He didn't have to be in a deluge before he believed that his prayers were answered. The moment he saw a cloud the size of a man's hand. And again, I've been on that exact spot, and when you look out at the Mediterranean, just as far as the eye can see, it's like water, and there's nothing that you can see out there, and all of a sudden this little tiny cloud the size of a man's hand came up. I really can relate to what Elijah was seeing here, and just that tiny manifestation was enough. He knew that once he broke through the barrier, once that this little cloud began to start manifesting, the rest of it would come. And so he told Ahab to hurry up so the rain would stop him not. And in verse 45 it says, And it came to pass in the meanwhile that the heaven was black with clouds and wind, and there was a great rain. And Ahab rode and went to Jezreel. And the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. You know this term gird up. They wore robes in that day, and they had a girdle is what they called it. It would be like, I don't know, what we call a belt or something, a cloth around your waist. And when you were going to run in one of these robes, your feet would get tangled up. So what they would do, if a person wanted to run, they would reach between their legs, grab the back part of their robe and pull it up between their legs and tuck it into this girdle or this belt. That's what girding up your loins was about, and it made, in a sense, like you had pants on instead of a robe. You wouldn't get caught in it, and you could run. So this is what it's talking about, that he girded up his loins, and he outran Ahab to Jezreel, which was over, I figured this out before I forget right now, but it was over, I think, 17 or 20 miles, something like that. Ahab was in a chariot, had a head start, and Elijah outran him. And that's pretty awesome. That is pretty awesome. And you know what this was? I mean, Elijah had just challenged the prophets of Baal. He had mocked them. He stood there. He poured water over his sacrifice so that it was even harder. There was going to be no doubt about this being God. And he prayed, and fire fell out of heaven and consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the water, the rocks. The entire nation repented. These people fell on their face and cried out, The Lord, He is God. He killed 850 prophets of Baal and prophets of the grove. And then he went back up to the top of the mountain, put his head between his knees, began to pray, and stayed instant in prayer, continued to pray until he saw the manifestation, and then this rain came. You know what? Elijah was pumped. I believe that all of his adrenaline was flowing. He had seen things happen that nobody else in the history of the world had ever seen. He took an entire nation that had turned towards pagan things and had renounced the Lord, and saw this entire nation turn towards God. And Elijah was just so excited. He was running on adrenaline, and he literally outran a chariot for 17 miles at least until he got to Jezreel. I tell you, this was powerful. This was powerful. I just, even though this is so descriptive, I just don't think any of us have a full revelation of what this must have been like for Elijah to have been the one who did all of these things. It had been built up for 3.5 years. And he had been waiting on this day, and it finally came to pass. He saw all of his dreams, all of his hopes fulfilled. And it was awesome. And you know, today is going to be my last day to offer you this, I think it's the fourth teaching, or the third teaching in this series entitled Holy Fire. And on our next program, we will begin into 1 Kings chapter 19. But let me just set this up and say that he had nothing but a string of absolute successes for 3.5 years. And it culminated with the fire of God falling, the entire nation falling on their face and turning back to God. It was awesome. And then the very next verse, as it starts into chapter 19, shows Elijah's greatest failure. Elijah, blew it big time. And I'm going to make this point on our program in more detail tomorrow. But let me just start by saying this, that most people think that it's when you're under pressure and under duress is when you're your weakest, and this is when people are vulnerable and they might renounce their faith in the Lord and they fail. I believe that this and other places in Scripture show it's just the opposite. It's when you have done your best. It's when you're at the pinnacle. It's when you have seen everything come to pass, is when you are actually at your most vulnerable position, because success destroys more people than failure ever did. Now, I know some of you may think, well, man, that doesn't sound right. We have, these common sayings. I've seen these little plaques about, that I forget the exact wording, but if you squeeze a lemon, out comes lemon juice, because that's what's, in it. And if you are under pressure, you will really reveal what you're really made of. I believe it's just the opposite. When you're under pressure, a person that even has a casual commitment to the Lord, that is only committed a little bit, man, people will turn and seek the Lord when their back is against the wall and it looks like disaster if God doesn't come through. Even people with minimal commitment to God seek God in hard times. But when everything is going good, when it looks like you're a success, that's when you're actually your most vulnerable, because you aren't as God dependent. You think, well, everything's fine. I don't need God. I'm just doing wonderful on my own. And that's when more people are destroyed than anything else. I believe you can see that in this nation. When this nation has been under pressure during World War II, man, there was a massive turning to the Lord. People prayed. They had nationwide prayer meetings, and people sought God, and God came through. But now we have lived in a period of prosperity, and the entire generation has grown up and has known prosperity in America that our forefathers never knew, and as a result we have turned away from God. More people turn away from God during prosperity and successful times than they ever do during hard times.
Andrew's complete teaching titled Lessons from Elijah is available in a brand new book for £9. It's also available in a brand new companion study guide that's perfect for home groups, Sunday schools, and for individual study. Not only is the entire teaching included in the study guide, you can also print off as many copies as you like when you download the PDF files from the included data CD. This valuable resource is available for £17.50. Lessons from Elijah is also available on either CD or DVD, as seen on TV, for £16. Or you can get these products as part of the Lessons from Elijah package. The package includes the new book, the new study guide, and your choice of either the CD or the DVD. This entire package has a catalog value of £42.50, but today you can get it for £26. Go to awme.net and look under What's on TV to see the options. The third audio teaching in today's series is titled Holy Fire. It's available for £3 when you write or call, but if you're simply unable to afford it, Andrew and his partners will provide this third CD free of charge. You can use your credit card to order resources through our website at awme.net. While you're there, you can discover more product details and download additional free resources. Or you can order through our helpline Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Our helpline number is 01922-473-300. When calling from outside the UK, you must dial your international calling code, then 44-1922-473-300. If the lines are busy, remember you can order ministry materials 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at awme.net. To write us, use the address on your screen. We hope to hear from you today. We'd like to point out Andrew's upcoming speaking schedule. Mark your calendars to come meet Andrew at one of these events. In the month of October, he'll be in Victor Harbor, South Australia, Melbourne, Victoria, Australia, and in Carrara, Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia. In November, he'll be in Shreveport, Louisiana, Dallas, Texas, and in Fort Worth, Texas. And in January, he'll be in Phoenix, Arizona, and in Woodland Park, Colorado. For more details on Andrew's next meeting in your area, visit our website at awme.net.
I'm coming to Australia on October the 26th through November the 2nd. This will be my third trip down under, and I'm excited about going, and I'd like to encourage you to join me. First of all, I'm going to be in Victor Harbor, South Australia. I'll be at the Bayside Church International on October the 26th, 27th, and 28th, and that'll be their Glorious Grace Conference. And then I go to Hope City Church in Melbourne, Australia, and I'll be there for one night only, October the 29th. And then on October the 31st through November the 2nd, we're holding a Gospel Truth Seminar at the Dream Center Complex on the Gold Coast of Australia. And this is also where we're going to kick off our Charis Bible College that is starting up in Australia. And so it's going to be a great time. Remember, October the 26th through November the 2nd in Australia.
I got saved and I was like, I just need to go to Bible college because I need to know more about God. It changed my life completely. Like, I just became a happier person. I just know Jesus now, and just unbelievable, you know. And it's been just the best 2 years of my life.
With several locations, Charis Bible College UK is waiting for you. For more information, visit awme.net today. Are you a world changer? Charis Bible College has extension schools around the world. The same truth that sets you free at our school in England will also set you free in Belfast, St. Petersburg, Amsterdam, Kampala, Chennai, and South Africa. Go to awme.net or call our phone center and ask for a complete list of Charis Bible College locations near you. Change your life. Change the world.